Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're tackling a topic you're clearly drawn to: zombies. And judging by your collection of articles and Reddit threads, you're not just here for the brain-eating thrills. You want to really explore
Yeah,
this.
it's fascinating stuff.
It is. So we're going to separate zombie myths from any potential scientific realities and really discover why this concept remains, well, undead.
I think that's a great way to put it. And it's interesting you mentioned the cultural obsession with zombies because it's not just a modern thing.
Right. Like one article mentioned that the ancient Greeks were so afraid of zombies that they actually weighed down their dead with rocks.
Oh, wow.
Almost like they were saying, like, nope, sorry, you were staying down there.
Yeah,
It's kind of a morbid thing to think about, but it makes you wonder what they were so scared of.
absolutely. And that practice of weighing down the dead, it really highlights this deep-seated fear of death and the unknown that has been around for centuries.
And they weren't alone, right?
Not at all. Cultures all over the world have developed these rituals to prevent the dead from rising.
Wow.
And each of them reflecting a unique set of beliefs and anxieties about what happens after we die.
And speaking of anxiety surrounding the dead, one of the articles you sent me was about Haitian zombie law.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It turns out that turning someone into a zombie is actually a crime there. I mean, isn't that wild?
It really is.
It's like something straight out of the articles, but it's embedded in their legal system. That blend of folklore, belief, and actual law is fascinating, don't you think?
It is. It really underscores how sometimes truth can be even stranger than fiction.
So before we get too far, maybe we should define what we mean by zombie for our exploration today.
Okay, good idea.
You know, the article 13 Gruesome Facts brought up a good point. Frankenstein's monster wasn't technically a zombie.
Right. Good point.
So where do we draw the line? How are we defining zombie for this deep dive?
I think for our purposes, we're focusing on the classic reanimated corpse driven by this primal hunger.
Usually for brains.
Usually for brains, yeah.
Mm,
Sorry, Frankenstein.
you'll have to sit this one out.
Another time.
Exactly. So while we're on the topic of definitions, where did the word zombie even come from? It seems like it's just always been around.
It does, doesn't it? But it actually has West African origins, and it's really deeply rooted in spiritual traditions and folklore.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. It likely evolved from terms like Nzambi, meaning God,
Oh.
and Zumbi, or Unzumbi, which refer to like a fetish or a spirit.
So the modern day pop culture zombie has all these layers of history and meaning that we never even think about.
We really don't.
And it makes you think about those ancient Greeks we were talking about and how that connects to these cultural beliefs.
Yeah, it's all interconnected.
It's really fascinating. So we've got these ancient Greeks, Haitian zombie laws. It's all super interesting. But is there any real historical case, anything that hints at zombies actually existing? You know I love a good mystery.
Well, there's one compelling case from Haiti in the 1960s, the story of Clairvius Narcisse.
Okay.
The History.com article you sent goes into some detail, but essentially, this man was declared dead, buried, and then almost 2 decades later, he reappears, claiming he'd been turned into a zombie and was forced to work on a plantation.
Okay, now that's a story.
It is.
Wow.
And it was huge at the time. And whether you believe his account or not, it raises some really interesting questions about the potential for toxins, cultural practices, and what some might even call supernatural occurrences to maybe have some basis in the natural world.
So it's like that blurred line we were talking about
Exactly.
between what we choose to believe and what might actually be possible.
Right.
I mean, it's where my skeptical side wants to come in.
Yeah.
I'm all for a good mystery, but reanimated corpses.
Yeah.
That's a tough one for me to swallow.
It's a tough one for a lot of people.
However, those Reddit threads about, like, fungal outbreaks
Uh-huh.
and diseases that can alter brain function, those really have me thinking.
Yeah, those are definitely worth exploring.
I mean, rabies, toxoplasmosis, those are real.
Very real.
And they can cause some truly bizarre and frightening changes in behavior.
They can.
So could there be a connection there?
There could be some links there, yeah. And it seems like you've really got a good handle on some of the more realistic scenarios for a zombie-like outbreak.
Yeah.
So let's dig into those a bit, shall we?
Okay.
From what you've read, what do you think is the most plausible way, if we're really going there, that we might see something like a zombie outbreak?
Well, I mean, those articles, those Reddit threads, the idea of a fungal pandemic, like in The Last of Us, it definitely captured a lot of people's imaginations.
Right. It's a great show.
It is.
And you know what's interesting about that show is it does take its creative liberties.
Yeah, it
But it
does.
does tap into some real anxieties.
Yeah, for sure.
Like, remember that ant-controlling fungus we were talking
Yeah.
about earlier?
Oh, yeah. That was both fascinating and creepy.
Tell me about it. So essentially, there are certain types of fungi, and Ophiocordyceps is a great example that can infect insects
Okay.
and essentially hijack their nervous systems
Uh-huh.
and control their behavior.
Really?
Oh, yeah. They can even manipulate the host's movements, leading them to specific places where the fungus can then thrive and spread its spores.
So they basically turn the ants into little zombies.
Kind of, yeah. It's like something straight out of a horror movie.
Right.
Now, it's obviously a far cry from that kind of, mind control and rapid spread that we see with the fictional zombies.
Right.
But it just illustrates how the natural world,
Yeah.
it can be just as strange and sometimes even more unsettling
Yeah.
than anything we can imagine.
Okay, so fungal infections, possible, check, but not exactly a speedy apocalypse.
Yeah, it's a long shot. The likelihood of a fungal pandemic wiping out humanity is incredibly slim.
Okay, good to know, good to know. So what about viruses? Could a virus really trigger that kind of hyperaggression we see in like 28 days later in World War Z?
Well, we already have a prime example. Rabies.
Oh, okay.
So rabies is a virus. It can cause extreme aggression in animals, and it's spread through bites.
So theoretically, a rabies-like virus could be behind like a zombie-esque outbreak.
You would think so, right. But, and this is a big but,
okay.
it usually kills the host pretty quickly.
Oh.
Like long before they could ever dream of building up a horde and wreaking havoc.
Okay, so they wouldn't be sprinting.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be super strong.
No, they certainly wouldn't have the stamina for all that running and biting that we see in the movies.
Okay. It was fun while it lasted.
It was fun to think about.
I have to admit, it's a little bit of a relief.
Sure, yeah.
Huh? But,
But, however, and this is where things get really interesting,
okay.
what if a virus like rabies, right,
Yeah.
were to mutate? Imagine if it became even more easily transmissible,
Huh.
right? So maybe airborne instead of just through bites.
Oh.
And what if it had a longer incubation period?
So someone could be infected.
They could be
I
infected
could even know it.
and spreading it without even realizing it.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
And just to kind of up the ante even more, what if this hypothetical mutated virus could somehow preserve the host's basic motor functions for a longer period,
Okay.
even as it's ravaging their brain, leading to, unpredictable aggressive behavior?
Okay, now we're talking.
Yeah. Now that's a scary thought.
Yeah. But I mean, even with like a super rabies on the loose, wouldn't modern medicine, quarantines, wouldn't all those disaster preparedness plans we put in place, wouldn't that kind of contain it?
You would hope so, right?
Why are we so obsessed with this idea of a zombie apocalypse?
It's a good question.
When realistically, it seems like a long shot.
Right, but I think it speaks to a much deeper fascination
Yeah.
that goes beyond the realm of whether or not this could scientifically happen.
Okay.
Remember that Stanford scholar you were reading about?
Yeah.
Their work suggested that our modern obsession with zombies, it really took off in the aftermath of World War II,
Okay.
a time of immense global anxiety,
Oh, yeah.
the threat of nuclear war, the Cold War.
Right.
People were living with this very real possibility of just total annihilation.
And zombies, with their insatiable hunger and their relentless pursuit, they kind of became a powerful metaphor for those anxieties, didn't they?
Exactly.
That fear of the unknown, that loss of control, the potential collapse of society,
Yeah,
even like confronting our own mortality.
it's all there.
Yeah, it's all there in the zombie myth.
It really is.
Yeah.
Zombies, they force us to confront those primal fears, but in a safe, fictional space.
Right, exactly. But as we've been discussing, it's not just about those big historical events or even those hypothetical viruses.
Right.
Think about how the CDC used the whole zombie apocalypse scenario for their disaster preparedness campaign.
Oh, yeah, that was brilliant.
So smart,
It really was.
because they tapped into this collective fascination with the zombies. And they were able to engage the public in a way that, those regular old PSAs just couldn't.
They just can't compete
No.
with a good zombie.
Because deep down, I think we're all a little bit curious about how we'd react in the face of the unthinkable.
Of course.
What would we do to survive?
Right.
What choices would we make? It's kind of human nature to think about that.
Absolutely. And those questions, those what-if scenarios,
Yeah.
they tap into something so fundamental about the human experience.
It's true.
We're naturally drawn to stories of survival
Yeah.
and the zombie apocalypse. Well,
Yeah.
it provides this compelling, albeit extreme, framework for exploring those themes.
It makes you think about those Reddit threads that we discussed, the ones where people were debating what they would do in a zombie apocalypse.
Oh, I love those.
Would they band together? Would they help their neighbors? Or would they just say, every man for himself?
It's a fascinating ethical dilemma,
It is.
isn't it?
Yeah.
And sometimes in those fictional scenarios,
Yeah.
it's the human characters, not the zombies,
Oh, interesting.
that end up being the real monsters.
Because they turn on each other.
They do.
Wow.
They make these really ruthless decisions
Out of fear and desperation.
out of fear, out of desperation.
Yeah. So it's like the real threat isn't just the zombies themselves. It's that potential for us to kind of lose our humanity
Yes,
in the face of crisis.
100%. And those stories,
Yeah.
they make you question, what would you do?
Totally.
What kind of survivor would you be?
It's like looking into a distorted mirror in a way. We see these monstrous creatures driven by primal hunger, and we're both repulsed and kind of captivated at the same time. Because maybe on some level we recognize a little bit of ourselves
Of course.
in their, relentlessness.
Absolutely. That's a very insightful way to put it.
Thanks.
The zombie apocalypse isn't just about surviving, a physical threat.
Oh, it's so much more than that.
It's about surviving a moral one.
Wow.
It's about holding on to our humanity
Yeah.
when everything around you is telling you to just completely let go.
That's deep.
Right.
Yeah.
Makes you think.
That's powerful stuff. So as we kind of wrap up our zombie deep dive here,
Yeah.
what would you say is the biggest takeaway for our listener? What should they carry with them after listening to this conversation?
Well, I hope that they've gained a deeper understanding of the zombie myth, its origins, and, the science behind what makes it so terrifying and so enduringly popular.
And let's not forget all the fun facts.
Oh, of course not. All the trivia,
They're going to be dropping zombie trivia everywhere.
they're going to be the life of the party.
They are. But more importantly,
Yes.
I hope that they're left with this question. What does our fascination with zombies actually say about us? About our fears and our hopes and the choices that we might face in a world that, let's face it, feels increasingly uncertain.
It's valid fear.
It is. It's been an enlightening journey, to say the least.
It is.
And to our listener, we'll leave you with this final thought. In a world that sometimes feels like it's teetering on the edge, what kind of survivor would you be?